The EU AI Act is here, and how does it help build trust? Well, yes, the idea behind digital market, digital society, digital Europe is that it's safe, it respects fundamental rights, it protects privacy of individuals, and that's why we had the EU GDPR, then the EU AI Act, and so on and so forth. And we will have more. But how does EU AI Act specifically help build trust, and how do you define trust in a digital society? Well, these are interesting questions. And to answer these questions, we have none other than Kai Zenner, who's a digital enthusiast, who has a blog, who's also in the OECD AI Policy Observatory. He's also active in many other forums relating to AI and digital society. And we are going to ask him about how EU AI Act builds digital trust. So let's go and have a conversation with him.
Hello, and welcome to the Fit for Privacy podcast with Punit Bhatia. This is the podcast for those who care about their privacy. Here, your host, Punit Bhatia, has conversations with industry leaders about their perspectives, ideas, and opinions relating to privacy, data protection, and related matters. Be aware that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are not legal advice. Let us get started.
So here we are with Kai Zenner. Kai, welcome to the Fit for Privacy podcast. It's a pleasure to have you.
Many thanks for the invitation.
Okay, let's start with the premise that you have been working on and you have the education and all those years that you spent. We are moving towards what we call a digital society. It's about data, it's about digital, and the society is becoming more and more digital. And one of the parameters we talk about is that there needs to be trust, and that's why we have the cybersecurity laws, the GDPR, and now even the EU AI Act. Could you define or elaborate on how digital society and trust go hand in hand?
Yes, so especially here in Europe, there is this realization now for quite some years that when it comes to the technical advance, when it comes to big investments, we are so far lacking behind. But where we are still strong is indeed to have digital products, digital services that people can trust in because they have higher, for example, privacy levels, higher safety levels, and so on. And the whole idea that the European Commission and the European Union in the last years developed as a kind of, yeah, possibility to create a competitive edge over some other regions of the world is to create legal frameworks that make sure that, for example, artificial intelligence technologies have a higher level of safety, security, privacy, and so on than in other regions of the world, meaning that people um, can have more trust in them. The same, not only speaking about competitive edge, is when it's coming to trust about accelerating, let's say, the digitalization of the society. Because, for example, when you are coming from Germany, many German citizens are highly skeptical, for example, to use an digital identity to log in into their bank account or to do taxes and so on. So especially when it comes to those member states, the Commission, in their attempt to build up a digital environment where trust and safety are very important. And yeah, they are trying to kind of make it so safe, so clear that even countries where you have a lot of concerns, like in Germany, people are kind of pushed to use more digital tools, digital services, and so on. So again, it's about building a competitive edge, but also using trust in order to accelerate the digitalization and digital deployment of tools within the society.
Okay, that's interesting. And when we say a digital society, and there are many actors in that, and especially there are actors from other regions who probably don't have a legal presence here, and then the legislative framework has to extend itself beyond the aspect of being legally applicable or legally relevant here to to actors or to companies who are not based here, like the EU GDPR did. Is that the intention of the EU or the Parliament to go in that direction? Maybe say going even further.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit disputed this point. So, for example, I'm working for the EPP group, which is a conservative political group in the European Parliament, and our group is often very hesitant in yeah, kind of pushing our rules across the world and forcing other regions to yeah, kind of copy paste everything that is now happening in Europe. Others are there, yeah, let's say more open-minded, and they would indeed like to see that, for example, the GDPR rules are 100% applicable wherever you are going. In the final laws, it's always a little bit tricky and kind of vaguely written. First of all, the European Union hopes that there's a little bit, let's call it soft power approach, that those European legal regimes are so efficient, are quality wise so good that other countries are kind of taking them over without any pressure. A second attempt is, of course, that if you, as a non European company, want to do business, want to join the European market, you need to play by those European rules. So basically, by yeah, establishing this rule, other non-European companies are kind of forced, at least when they are active here with their products that they are selling here, to fulfill those rules. And then we are coming to a very gray area or unclear area, how it is if really, for example, a Canadian company is developing a product, but only for the North American market, never want to bring it in the European Union, but then maybe some customers are using the system in the European Union. The AI Act has there Article 2, paragraph 1, point C, which is saying that even this output from a Canadian AI system would need to play by the rules of the AI Act, but how to enforce it in
Yeah.
Canada. There we are going back to trade agreements, to international private law, and even the lawyers here within the European institutions, Commission and Parliament and Council, were not really sure how this is playing out in practice. So to summarize my answer to your question, there is an attempt definitely to have an extraterritorial effect with the AI Act, but also with our other digital laws. Mostly it's more soft power or soft law approach, but there is a potential legal, let's say, obligation of non-European companies to fulfill digital EU laws, but it's unclear if it's really enforceable.
So that's clear. We are moving as we move into this digital society. We put, say, highest priority on the fundamental rights, where trust, privacy, all these elements are of key, essential or essence or values for us as Europe. And then we are saying we would go or use the power insofar we can and experiment and explore how far we go. We did that in the GDPR, now it's in the EU AI Act. And then do you see that this EU AI Act then is helping us build or create that digital trust in the long term? Because, of course, it's complex, as you said, but does it help? Does it go in that direction for EU citizens?
It's very difficult to say right now. I think in principle, and the original proposal from the Commission in this regard was going in a good direction, because indeed it was mainly principle driven. So, in comparison to other EU digital laws, it was not so much going into detail, but it was very clear that those OECD AI principles that were adopted by all G20 countries in 2019 were playing a big role, which is good for international alignment. And basically, in the end, we're now translated into European legal systems and would have created an ecosystem in which AI technology would have been built and deployed in a way that probably European citizens can trust in. Um, it was in the initial draft. In the long run, I think it will lead the AI Act to a situation that our AI technologies are reaching high levels of quality, safety, privacy, and so on, meaning that citizens can be sure to a certain extent that those systems are well intentioned and yeah can trusting in their operations. Where I'm worried is, let's say, a short-term or mid-term effect, because as you said, the AI Act is very complex, and therefore I see many companies, especially smaller companies, struggling in the first months and maybe even years to fulfill the obligations in the AI Act, and maybe even to understand what the obligations for them as developer or deployer of an AI system are. And therefore, maybe as a result, we will see 3 to 5 years of high legal uncertainty, which would not only exist for developers and deployers of AI systems, but then, of course, also for end users, for the citizens, because they, if there is, for example, an accident, they are getting harmed or their fundamental rights are violated. If the rules are not clear, they probably have also problems to get liabilities or redress, to get a successful court case in the end, and so on. So yeah, let's see how it's playing out, and hopefully I'm wrong with my more pessimistic assessment for the near future. But as I said, for the long term or with a long-term perspective, I do think that the AI Act, but also the other digital laws in the European Union are probably heading in a good direction, making everything better and creating a situation in which we can trust our digital technologies within Europe.
Indeed, I think it's one of the first initiatives wherein we have gone extendedly in terms of controlling or managing AI. And it is a step in the right direction, but we don't know how successful or unsuccessful it will be and which direction or directional changes we would need to make. But there's the fundamental debate around, and I want to hear it from you because you've been instrumental in drafting and have followed this for 9 years very closely. Is this a product safety legislation, or is it a rights assurance mechanism, or is it a rights redressal mechanism? That is, like in the US, you can sue a party and then get some claims, which is not a direction EU prefers usually. So, which is the vision behind EU AI Act?
Yeah. So the European Parliament, to start with us, we had a different idea and we wanted to go a little bit in the direction of the US approach or UK approach. So having, um, let's say, non-binding ethical standards for all AI systems, then have sectorial legislation that is really going let's say, in the details of the use cases and addressing the specific, let's say, threats or dangers or uncertainties of the development and deployment in the specific cases, and then complement everything with a strong liability regime. Now with the AI Act, indeed, we have a product safety legislation piece, but not, let's say, a clean one, if that is the right word, because it's a kind of hybrid legal framework. It's not only product safety, but it was complemented by fundamental rights protection, which makes it really difficult to evaluate or to assess right now, because with product safety, the European Union has a lot of experience. It's a well-functioned ecosystem where people know each other, where the proceedings or processes are very clear. Now that fundamental rights protection is included, it's not so clear anymore. And there are a lot of actors that are now forced to work together, that are working very differently, have no idea how the other people are working. To give an example, in the risk assessment in product safety, you will need it only to look into risks for health and safety so far. Now you need to look also for risk for fundamental rights, meaning that market surveillance authorities in the future will need to work together with data protection authorities, which have completely different perspectives. So this is one of those reasons why I was talking before about legal uncertainties, that I'm not so sure how the next 2, 3, 4 years are working out, and that we need at least some months or maybe even some years to make adjustments to connect people, like I said, data protection people and market surveillance authority, for example, from the health sector, that so far have not worked together. And then going back to your liability question, so far, we have in the European Union now an updated product liability directive, which is covering from the AI Act health and safety violations. So if in those cases, because AI is now part of this product liability directive, you could potentially file a redress claim if there, for example, damage or harm happened. But on fundamental rights, it's not so clear what is happening. We have national liability regimes that sometimes could work, sometimes maybe not. We have maybe some sectorial liability regimes, maybe even strict liability regimes, for example, with automated cars or automated vehicles. But again, especially with fundamental rights, with discrimination and so on, there is maybe a liability gap. And this is something the EU institutions will look into in the next years. There is already an AI liability directive presented by the Commission, which potentially could close this gap. But yeah, the Parliament and the Council will now, only after the summer break, start to look into this particular legislative proposal, because we were overwhelmed with all those other digital laws that have been discussed until the European election.
So that's fair enough. I think if I were to put it in my words, I would say it's a hybrid approach. You take the liability, the market competition, controlling the products as a safety element, and then the fundamental, all those elements are combined, and hence the complexity and the uncertainty that it will bring in the early part of, let's say, few years. But then things would settle. But another thing I take from is it's not the end state. It will be complemented with other legislations, other directives to make sure that the gaps are plugged in, because it cannot be the end all solution.
Exactly, exactly. And even not only in only the AI sector, let's say, will be dominant. This, I think the European Union did well, even though right now there is a problem that there are contradictions and overlaps. But if we are able to fix those overlaps and contradictions, we have now really a kind of digital legal framework that is dealing with data, non-personal data and personal data, Data Act and GDPR. We have the AI Act, we have the Digital Services Act for platforms, we have Digital Market Act for gatekeepers, so very powerful in market terms, companies that need to fulfill stricter rules. We have a lot of specific laws that are looking into platform workers, for example, those working for Uber Eats or Amazon and so on. And all those pieces, in the end, again, if we are managing to fix those overlaps and contradictions, should indeed create a framework that, going back to our first topic, is creating a high level of trust that companies can have, but especially citizens can have in the digital market in the European Union.
That makes perfect sense. And I think some of the laws have been written from the non digital world, like the IP, the copyright, and those, and they never envisaged these kind of scenarios which we are going to encounter or we are encountering already through AI and through all the emerging technology. So they would, over time, not in 1 or 2 years, but in coming years, need a bit of fine tuning or refresh, probably.
Indeed.
Yeah, and as we do that, one of the key elements that you already talked about is the EU AI Act takes a risk based approach. So it's not that there is a compliance obligation or requirements obligation for everybody, but there there are two dimensions. One, the EU AI Act does specify how do you classify, and of course there would be more guidance coming along. But is it a choice people have or companies have, that I will choose to be, or I will play around and be medium risk or high risk or low risk? Or is it going to be really a subjective, or rather than subjective, I would say objective approach, saying this is how you choose which category you end up, and then you don't have a choice? How would it work?
Yes, it's tricky to answer because there are several layers, let's say.
Yeah.
First of all, you are right with the second part of or the second option that you presented, that in general, the AI Act, the law, is very clear. If you are in, for example, the category of critical infrastructure, you are using an AI system for the authorization or the management of critical infrastructure, then you are high risk. The company cannot say, no, I'm not high risk, so I'm not fulfilling any rules in principle. Well,
Yeah.
however, it is now the case that we were saying companies, when they are producing an AI system and placing it on the market, do not need to do a third-party conformity assessment in most cases, except biometrics. There they need to do a third-party conformity assessment, meaning, for example, in Germany, they would need to go to the TÜV or DEKRA, those notified bodies that are, again, a third party that are checking basically your whole product, if it's high risk, if it's fulfilling the obligations of the AI Act, and so on. Since they don't need to go to those third parties, they will do it via an internal conformity assessment. And they could, for example, just say, well, even though we are maybe falling in the category of high risk, we don't think we are high risk, and just placing their AI system on the market. There are two problems in this approach from the perspective of the company. In this approach, there is no, let's say, no power to force them to do otherwise, but they would have a huge problem once they are placing the product on the market, and then the market surveillance authorities are firstly saying, wait, you misclassified because we think you are high risk, and you didn't even notify us that you don't think you are high risk, because this would require a dialogue between you and us, and we think we are right. So this is the first point why they potentially would face a huge fine. And secondly, if they are misclassifying, or even if they are not misclassifying themselves, if their product would violate AI Act standards or maybe even other laws, market surveillance authorities have a long list of methods that they could use against this company. And in the end, they could even ask the company to completely withdraw the AI system in a matter of days, which means a lot of cost for this company. And again, it could be combined with huge fines. So to make it short, even though there is a lot of flexibility and freedom for companies until they are placing an AI system on their market, and there is in most cases no obligation to involve other players to check your product, um, it's well, once they are putting it on the market, there is such a big risk to get a fine otherwise, that probably most companies will not take this risk, but will want to make sure that the system is completely compliant with the AI Act even before they are putting it on the market.
No, that's fair enough. I think it's always wiser to take a safer approach, especially with regulatory compliance and having a defensible position. But here we are talking about a bit of complexity or anomaly. In sense, one, there's the software which we call the AI system, and one, the product which is using that AI system. I mean, I give you an example like Alexa. It's
Yeah.
a device, but behind it, it's a system. The phone is a device, but behind it, now they are saying we will build the AI system. That's a software. Same way, an ultrasound device, it's a medical device, but behind it, it can be having artificial intelligence so that it does more than just scanning certain parts of the body. And so, which one would the EU AI Act apply? Because for the other one, the product, there is the product safety legislation already.
Yes. No, but in the end, so since the AI Act is yeah, a product safety legislation, AI systems are products in the end. So
Okay.
in the end, it would be really the device that you are putting, or the final AI system or downstream AI system, we called it in our negotiations always. So for example, SAP, the German HR company that is producing a lot of B2B products, would create an AI system that can be used in order to scan applications for a new position in a company. And this system is then being used by, let's say, a German city that is using it for themselves, for a city hall, for example. Then we would have SAP as a provider that needs to fulfill the whole AI Act, because they want to bring this HR AI system on the market. And also the city hall, let's say, of Munich in Bavaria, would need to fulfill certain obligations as a deployer based on the AI Act. There, basically, there is not really a differentiation of what in the end is a device, or is an end product, and what is, let's say, yeah, sheer AI technology, sheer numbers, and so on and so on. It's really, the AI Act is only looking on the end product. One thing that needs to be taken into account, and this touches up on a little bit what you were saying at the beginning, is that we in the EU institutions were very aware that, similar to a car, an AI system, when we are talking now about the end product, is often really an end product that is consisting of a lot of different pieces, a lot of different data sets, a lot of external companies or contractors that are maybe just yeah, joining the project a few days in order to do some coding or some services that they are contributing, and so on. And we wanted to make sure that all those different actors along the AI value chain are playing a part in the end. And that's, in my example, not only SAP that is basically feeling the whole set of obligations of the AI Act, and maybe lacking in many situations information from all those other players. This is being described in Article 25, as it is called responsibilities along the value chain. And this article makes sure that, going back to what I just said, all players that played a part in designing or creating the final AI product need to share at least information, or in other situations, maybe even need to provide technical support and so on, in order to allow the final downstream company that is placing the AI product on the market to become fully compliant with the AI Act. How this works in practice, we don't know, because it was a very theoretical discussion that we had there. We were trying to solve this situation with standard contractual clauses. The Commission will create templates that companies can use in order to make sure that the necessary information flow is happening. But again, it's something really new. And also here, I would say a side effect is, at least at the beginning, legal uncertainty, because companies need to get used to it if they are not already doing it.
So, in essence, it's not straightforward binary yes no question. It's a question which builds up from, are you using an AI system? Which risk category is that classified in? How is it deployed? And what
Yes,
role do you play in the whole value chain? And
exactly,
all that then determines what obligations would apply and what
exactly,
you need to do. And maybe more than what you need to do, you need to collaborate with a party on the left and a party on the right, so that you are fulfilling your obligations in essence.
indeed,
And everyone
indeed.
in entirety would be responsible. So, which will be quite an ambitious challenge, I would say.
Exactly. So there is the regulatory focus. We said always on the downstream actor. It's typical product safety legislation approach that, again, this company that is, or even a university, or whoever is commercializing the product or service, and placing it on the market or putting it into service, this actor is the focus of the AI Act. But indeed, as you just said, all the other players around in this ecosystem or in the AI value chain of this specific product or service will play a part.
So that will be very, very interesting. And only time will tell how that will shape up and how that will develop. But
Yeah.
I think that's needed, because if you look at your example of the car, it has many, many, many AI systems in that. There's a
Yes.
suspension system which gives a warning. There's a braking system. There's an alert system. There's a sensing system, and there's also checks on various parts of the say technical equipment, and all of them combine and feed data into a system which makes decisions, but
Yes.
each one of them is feeding a decision. So it's going to be, I think, very interesting times. But as we move into this digital society or digital market or digital Europe, as we call it, in the next 20 to 30 years, what, at a, say, macro level, what steps do you see in addition to realization of this EOI Act, and also realization of the dream of, or the reality of, this digital Europe?
Yeah. Um, I think right now the most important point, and I made already once a statement about it, that I really feel we did a bit too many digital laws at once. We are now at 116 digital laws in Europe. I think 88 are already have entered into force. Many of them are already applicable or will become applicable in 2025 or at latest 2026. And as I said, a lot of very good ideas, very good intentions, but also many, many overlaps and contradictions because of how the European Union and many democracies are working. There are a lot of work silos, and people are just not talking enough with each other and coordinating enough with each other. So I think number one priority is really to now make sure that our good intentions and ideas are really working in practice. And to my other points that I made several times already, it's not creating so high compliance costs for all those companies that want to play by the rules that in the end they are not competitive anymore because they need to spend a lot of money. And what I hear, for example, from Germany, from leading digital companies, that right now 30%, 30, so 30% of all their staffs is focusing on regulation and compliance. This is, of course, way too much. And therefore, hopefully, we are maybe um, let's say, besides our attempts here in Brussels to make the legal framework easier and more streamlined, hopefully we are also focusing more on easy compliance tools, maybe some private public partnerships, maybe the regulatory sandboxes that we now also find in the AI Act can play a role, digital innovation hubs, and so on. So let's say to deal with this compliance topic. A second point is yeah, let's say also an ongoing issue that we have now for a long time, digital skills or AI literacy in the case of artificial intelligence, where unfortunately the European Union doesn't have a lot of competences. It's a competence of member states. And we are really lagging behind. If you compare a German school to a South Korean school or Singaporean school, you see major differences. And yeah, I think there we really need to make strong improvements over the next year to really have, to quote you, Digital Europe in 10 years, a Europe where technologies are being used. When it comes to the mindset of people, there I'm a little bit more positive. Especially in Germany, we had huge problems that people didn't want to digitalize their life and so on. But I think it was good that our country became more international, and also those product teams or startups are nowadays having a lot of international people working there, because they kind of force the Germans that are always looking at the risks to open up, to try out, and so on and so on. And if we are, and this is the final point, if we are using this, let's say, more positive mindset and taking risk a step, and are really finally deploying technical tools. And one area, and there we are going very much in your trust direction, for example, European electronic identities in order to access your tax declaration, banks, and so on, and are rolling out those applications or those mechanisms across the European Union in different sectors, are able to centralize everything, then I think we could manage a real genuine digital Europe in the next 10 years. But yeah, our problem so far was, besides the lack of digital skills, really often the hesitation and this national mindset, so that we were only thinking about how this works in Germany, or even in Germany, we were only thinking how it works in Bavaria or in the area of Berlin. And yeah, let's hope let's hope that this changes now, and we are thinking really cross European, and are finally having those big projects being rolled out.
I think the time would tell, but as we talk about implementing in an organization, we talk about the policy, the process, the technology, and then the people. And when we talk about doing these changes at continent level or country level, then it's about legislation and society and skills. So
Yeah,
legislation, we are doing our bit, or you're doing your bit. When it comes to society adoption, I think people have seen what they've seen and they can't foresee what is coming to them. And that's
yeah,
where the adoption takes time. And then skills is what you need in terms of making that legislative framework be a reality on the ground. But we all know it's a huge effort and a huge challenge. But I think the world will change faster, and these kind of legislations would help us, and maybe we will have more trust and less fear, and that's the whole intention.
indeed.
So with that, I would say thank you so much for your time. It was wonderful to have you, and very insightful conversation, Kai.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
It's a pleasure. If you notice, in last 25 episodes, what we did is we deep dive into artificial intelligence and how it creates privacy risks, and what is artificial intelligence or EU AI Act all about. Now, as we close that season, that is in this episode, we are closing that chapter or season of AI Act or AI. Now we move our focus towards the digital trust dimension. That is, why do we need trust, or why is digital trust important as we move into a digital society? So in next 25 episodes, that is season 6 of the Fit for Privacy podcast, let's explore digital trust and its dimensions. And for those of you who have been following us, thank you so much for all your support. If you have ideas, inputs, ideas about speakers, ideas about questions, inputs about what we should do differently, do not hesitate to send us that information, because we love your feedback. And please do click like, do comment, and do subscribe, because that matters. And if you haven't already done, go to our Apple Podcast or Google Podcast or wherever you are listening and write a review about us. It matters, and your support matters. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. If you liked the show, feel free to share it with a friend and write a review. If you have already done so, thank you so much. And if you did not like the show, don't bother and forget about it. Take care and stay safe. Fit for Privacy helps you to create a culture of privacy and manage risks by creating, defining, and implementing a privacy strategy that includes delivering scenario-based training for your staff. We also help those who are looking to get certified in CIPPE, CIPM, and CIPT through on-demand courses that help you prepare and practice for certification exam. Want to know more? Visit www.fit4privacy.com. That's www.fit4privacy.com. If you have questions or suggestions, drop an email at hello@fit4privacy.com. Until next time, goodbye.